Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Zach Bones here from the Grip Show, and kind of got a grip feat of strength and some grip strength related stuff I'm going to cover. Going to be talking about York Blobs, but specifically the next generation, or what a lot of people will call the second generation. I guess there was like a generation in between the original York roundhead dumbbells. There was like a blue series or some kind of blue paint. I don't know if it was a completely different mold, but that was kind of like the second iteration of them. And then this would technically be the third generation. But yeah, usually they're just called second generation, next gen, or people will talk about these being USA stamped versus the originals not having any USA stamping on them. And I'll cover where that's at and what's going on with the stamp on the dumbbells or the blobs and what that means. Not going to get a lot into training or technique or anything like that for this. More just going to cover the item itself, kind of get some weights, show some of the size, and just kind of give an idea of what makes this challenging, how it's used. I'm going to talk about some of the feats I've done with it, different combo lifts, and then maybe I'll get into technique and other stuff in future videos. But yeah, for now, I have two heads from a York, we'll say next generation dumbbell. And one of the big things I think York did with this versus the originals was the originals kind of were notorious, especially at these bigger weights like the 100-pounders. They would come in a little bit heavy, but they had a real skinny handle and very prone to bending, getting dropped. They'd break easier, get bent. So when they, kind of improved upon that idea, when they made the next generation, they went ahead and kind of thickened up the handle just slightly to kind of help the breakage issue. So getting into a little bit more about the blobs here. So this is not the original feat that Richard Soren came up with off of a pre-USA, no USA stamp, the original first generation. That's the original blob, or the blob that Richard Soren had. And if anybody wants to look up that history, the story, the foundation, or see a full-length interview with Richard Soren himself, that's on the Grip Show YouTube. You can head over there and check that out. But right now, I'm not going to kind of just, retell that or, give you another secondhand version of it. If you're interested and want to check it out, go to the Grip Show. And just going to get into some of these differences here. So with me, I have a 100 number side and the York side here. So when their dumbbells would be produced, one dumbbell head would have the York name on it. The other head of the dumbbell will have the numbering based on, what that dumbbell weighs. So obviously when you're getting into blobs that were either bent, broken, has the handle removed, or someone intentionally cut them off to train grip and have blobs, you're instantly going to, you're going to take a 100-pound dumbbell, cut one of the heads off, roughly, minus the handle weight, and depending on what the original dumbbell weighed, you're going to get about half of what you got. Sometimes dumbbells come in light, sometimes they come in a little heavy, sometimes they're dead on where they're at. And, just that little pound or so of removing that handle, you get about exactly 50%. The next generation dumbbells that York came out with were pretty accurate in weight. I actually have a set of dumbbells over there that are stamped, USA stamped only on the York side on the bottom. That's the next generation. And they actually come in a little over 102 pounds. So you take that, if you were to split that in half and say, 51 pounds, remove the handle, you're looking at right about, anywhere from 49 to probably sub 51 pounds. You're pretty much right at a 50-pound blob here. Whereas the Fat Mans or the original feet with a different shape, bigger sides, those blobs would come in around 52 to 54 pounds, depending on, the dumbbell. So instantly, one of the things I always get when I'm posting or when I lift one of these is people will see the number and they instantly, they call you a liar. They say it's not really 100 pounds. And it's like, I'm not saying it's 100 pounds. It's just 100 that's been stamped on there from the foundry or when it was cast. And that's on there because it was from a 100-pound dumbbell. So it should be common sense, and you should just be able to look at if you know what a blob is, or you at least understand the idea of it. If you know it came from a dumbbell, It's not very hard to do the math, but yeah, a lot of people will say, oh, it's not 100 pounds. If you get to like the legacies, oh, that's not 120 pounds. It's like, yeah, I'm not claiming that. And I usually put all the weights and all the details in every lift I ever do. So I don't know. I think it's just people sitting at their house and they want to like have a gotcha moment or think that they're like calling you out, and they're not. They're just kind of showing how stupid they are. And, you know, they can't just put two and two together that, oh, it's half the dumbbell, so I guess it's about half the weight, and it's in the title. So with these York dumbbells or blobs, if they've been cut, you're never going to have a USA stamp on the bottom of the number side. So if you have a blob and you don't have a York side, there's no point to ever look at this side. You're not going to have a USA stamp on it. So you're not really going to be able to tell which generation that was or what blob you have without maybe weighing it, feeling it, having another blob to compare it with, or the previous owner maybe knowing, you know, what kind of dumbbell it came from. So moving on from that, if you get to the York side though, you will have, and it might not show up very clear here, but I'm going to have close-ups for you. So there is a USA stamp right there on the bottom of this. So if you have an intact dumbbell from York, if there's no stamp on the bottom of the York side, that's most likely, assuming they're round head dumbbells and they're this style, you know, of text and lettering and all that. And if you don't have a stamp, those are older. Those are going to probably be a little bit heavier, especially at the 100-pound range. They're going to have a slightly different mold or cast to them, and that would be more of the original feet. The next generation, still very, very solid feet of grip strength. It's still a very big challenge. If you put this in front of a lot of lifters, and when I say lifters, I don't mean grip specialists. I'm talking about just your average person that goes to the gym and trains and works out, and you know, maybe they do a little powerlifting, maybe they do a little bodybuilding, whatever they're into. If they don't have like just massive giant hands, generally people are not training an open hand pinch very much, and their thumbs usually not as strong as their fingers. So this becomes a pretty tricky lift to throw at somebody. It's probably, I know we could always make it more difficult, but to just have a 50-pound weight that sits around in your gym, this might be one of the hardest 50-pound plates, not plates, but weights to pick up. So, you know, I mean, and obviously, like I said, we can make that as challenging as we want if something's 50 pounds and try to make it harder to pick up. But for what it's worth, as a legitimate training tool, this is probably one of the hardest 50-pound weights for someone to pick up in any gym if you got one or if you have access to it. May not look like much on camera, may not look like much on the, you know, the whole grand scheme or scope of the internet, but it's a feat that will still stop a lot of people in their tracks, and there's still a lot of people that want to train up to it. And even though it's not the actual Fat Man Blob or the original pre-USA first generation York dumbbells and blobs, it's still a legitimate challenge, and it's still a big step on that ladder to get to the Fat Man or lift that original feat of strength, which is kind of the gold standard for blobs, being the original. If I had to put a number on it, I would say these York blobs that are next generation, they're slightly thinner on one side, and they kind of cut in just a little bit. They still slope outwards on both sides, but compared to a Fat Man or the first generation, they don't quite slope out as much. I would say that kind of brings them down to maybe 80% of what a Fat Man difficulty would be. So if you're lifting this, you're probably about in the 80% range of what it would be like to lift a Fat Man. And that's going to be a thing also, you know, depending on hand size and depending on strength levels. But it's still a legitimate feat of strength. It is definitely a lot harder than it looks, especially if you're looking at it through a screen and not in the same room. But yeah, so we pretty much just have a 50-pound chunk with some slopes on it and working pinch grip. That's not that you couldn't press these or do other stuff or facelifts with the fingers. That's, you know, facelifting is here. My hands aren't even big enough to facelift these, so I wouldn't mess with it. But there's like any weight or any tool you have, it's going to be as useful as your training IQ, your training knowledge, and how you implement that and execute your training. So, you know, none of the stuff I'm showing in any of these videos really has it doesn't have too many limitations. You can make whatever you want with it. If we just get into kind of weighing it, I mean, my hand isn't the widest, but it's probably about 4 inches across, you know, so just from the top of it. And I'll put up some close-ups of some other things. But yeah, it's about 4 inches to what I would call the ridge or the edges. But then it's going to slope out beyond that. And I don't know what that is at its biggest point. But yeah, when you're actually grabbing this thing, you're going to be down here. So you don't get that perfect, square pinch on it like you would a pinch block or like you would pinching a pair of plates. That sloping out is just going to cause you to have to squeeze a lot harder and makes this form of training wide pinch really unique. So we have the scale zeroed out here. Just going to go ahead and weigh both of these. And I haven't weighed them on this scale yet. I have another scale down here that's bigger. Weighed them on scales in the past. Haven't weighed these, so we'll just kind of go ahead and get a measurement, see about where these are at. I assume they'll both be right about 50 pounds, slightly over. Let me see here. So for that one, it looks like this 100 side is coming in at 49.86. So just under, we're talking about 0.14 under 50 pounds. So yeah, that's probably a dumbbell that was pretty close to its actual weight. So if you were to split that to let's say the dumbbell was 101 pounds, you cut that in half. You got 50 and a half, and then say you pull another pound out of the handle, you're pretty much going to, that's like dead on. So those dumbbells were probably really accurate, maybe a pound heavy, and we got that. This blob, I believe, is over 50, so this might have come from a slightly heavier one. But let's see what this York side weighs. These did not come from the same dumbbell, by the way. So, yeah, and this is reading 50.28. So hopefully that'll stay the same without me pulling on this cord too much, but yep. A little bit over 50 pounds there. So yeah, you'll also notice on these, and like I said, I'm not gonna get too much into technique, but you're gonna notice where these were cut or broken off and sanded down from dumbbells. So you're gonna see that little spot where the handle used to be. There are some replicas and some things that people get into casting or having made that are specifically cast as a blob or a pinch training tool. And that's a good thing these days because it also kind of preserves some of these more vintage weights that are sought after and keeping those kind of together since they're not producing anymore and haven't for decades probably, at least not the round heads. So just kind of getting into that, these were not cast as blobs. These came from dumbbells, but there are a lot of different blob replicas out there like the Blob 50, which can be bought on Canon PowerWorks. You can check out their website if you want to get kind of a Blob 50 cast, which is, the Blob 50 was basically someone had taken a next generation blob, had it casted and made a replica. So the difference with that would be it just says Blob 50 on the lettering. And yeah, it's just a training tool. That way, if you don't have access to the original York stuff, or you just don't feel like cutting up dumbbells to do this because the weights are important to you, or you don't want to dig into your dumbbells and start, sawing them up. Blob 50 will give you a pretty accurate, almost identical feel to this. Maybe some texture difference, whereas, one didn't have paint. And even these have different texture from blob to blob. Being a pinch lift, especially wide pinch with that friction, the friction matters, So not all of these, even though they're the same weight, roughly the same dimensions from cast to cast, friction is going to become a huge factor in how quickly they slip or how hard you have to pinch, and so just something to keep in mind if you have something like this. Take the time to do all the small stuff, chalk it right, figure out how to chalk it. Is there too little chalk, too much chalk? That's just something that you're going to have to figure out with your climate in your place and doing your own training. But getting into some different feats with this. I picked up this particular blob. This was the first next generation blob I ever had. I've done a lift where I've picked it up with just my thumb and 2 fingers like that. Thought that was a pretty good lift at the time. It's been a few years now. I've cleaned, basically a double blob clean. I've cleaned one of these blobs and had like an inch dumbbell in my other hand. Blob lifts with like hub transfer to picking up a blob lift, or plate pinching 45s with the blob in my other hand. I've also done things where like I've picked up one of these and then lifted 3 dumbbells in my offhand. So just different series, different combo lifts, a lot of that stuff. And I'm going to put a bunch of those in here because it fills some of this dead space, or you don't want to just watch me talk for 10, 20 minutes. You can kind of at least watch some cool lifts or get some ideas maybe for your own training. But those are just some feats off the top of my head that I did with this. I've also done kind of an old school method. I'm not sure where Jed Johnson got it from, but that's who I got it from, was Jed Johnson, where, obviously we have magnets and stuff, but one of the things that I picked up from, looking at Jed's training and other things he's done, prior to me even being in the sport, was tying just a simple shoestring or bootlace across the top and then looping that through your weights. So you could just hang weight on it. You still put your hand right over top of that string, and you can basically, add 2.5s, add 5s. If this is the only blob you have to work with, but you want to go heavier, that's a valid method of training or kind of overloading this. Another thing I'll mention, with blobs, I love blobs, but the biggest downfall for blobs is they're super hand size dependent. Because as these blobs get more challenging, as they get bigger, or I should say, as they get heavier, they also get wider, they get bigger. So it's kind of common sense, but that's going to make the hand size a really big limiting factor here. So let's say you get up to what you think is probably like the max stretch or the max length width that you can get your hand on and actually squeeze, or maybe just something that's even realistic to what you should be grabbing. Because you can get so specific and so crazy on a wide pinch, but it's like, well, what does that even carry over to other than just lifting that random object? So, I think that this is a pretty good range here to where you're not getting so stupid wide that it's like an insane, giant hand you have to have a giant hand to lift this. That's not true. But it is pretty wide and it is a challenge. So with that, talking about loading it with the shoelace or like bootstring type deal, you can add and customize this weight once you get to that kind of maximum width. So maybe you don't want to get into the York Legacies, which were produced after, where they get wider and have a slightly different shape. Maybe you don't want to get into trying to lift a Blobzilla, which is a half 130 Legacy. Maybe you don't have the hand for that. Well, you can take whatever that maximal blob is or something towards the top end of the width, and you can just continuously add weight to that or train it in different ways. So just because you have a single, chunk of steel or whatever it may be, you can still, add the magnets, tie weights to it, come up with different ways to train it. And that's just going to be on you to come up with ways to progress and challenge yourself in training. But something I would bring up, because I love blobs. I'm a big advocate for training them. They carry over to a lot of things. I think, trying to lift a fat man blob early on when I got into grip, that was really the first feat I chased after. And I think training blobs so hard early on really gave me good thumb strength that, somewhat translated over to helping me with the inch dumbbell later on, but definitely helped me with plate pinching. I was probably able to pinch 35s and 45s without really even doing any pinch work other than just doing blobs and then going, into a narrower pinch when I got to the plates. So definitely not to be overlooked. It's not like a lot of things in grip sport. It will help your wide pinch, but for just general hand strength and especially attacking your thumb, which gets neglected in a lot of grip and a lot of sport lifting or just anything, but especially grip. Unless you're doing pinch, a lot of people kind of neglect that thumb. So like I said, blob training has its uses. I might maybe get more in depth in future videos, but yeah, these are, your next generation, or if you ever see somebody say second generation, they probably mean these, even though there was some tiny, blue York dumbbells in between. But yeah, next generation, second generation blob with the USA stamp on the York side, coming in right about 50 pounds. Great training tool. And these days, I think they go for probably, this is all on the sellers and people are really screwing this up right now. You can find them on eBay, Marketplace, just type in York Blob. Whether that's half 100, 50-pound blob. You can type as many search things as you want. But I think I don't know what I got this one for. I can't remember. I bought this one much later. And I only got this one because I wanted to do like farmer's walks and carries or doubles, different feats that included doubles. So I wanted 2 of the same style of blob for that reason. But I had this blob a lot longer. And I want to say when I first got this one, it was probably very, very low 300s. Nowadays, you get people listing them for 350, 400. I've seen some ridiculous stuff on like Fat Man Blobs, which like I said, these are the next generation, but I've seen Fat Man Blobs listed for over $500, $600, and that's ridiculous. I don't think it should be that. I don't know what the people that are selling it are thinking, but it's their property. They can do what they want with it. I would recommend not buy it at that price. I think that just gives people more incentive to keep listing them at outrageous prices if they realize, oh man, someone's buying it. But maybe if it sits online for about 2 years and it doesn't sell, maybe they'll come down and realize that stupid pricing. So yeah, if you're looking to get one of these, I'd say you're probably going to at least be paying over 300 unless you luck out or you know what you're finding and you have a good marketplace find. And or unless you got a buddy or you know somebody, right? And they're just kind of getting rid of it. So every now and then you'll luck up on some. But yeah, for the most part, you can expect to pay about $300 for one of these if you want one of the originals. If you want something that's basically the exact same cast, you can check out Canon PowerWorks and get a Blob 50, and I think it's like $200 for one of those. So you can kind of get the same thing or the same, benefit with 2/3 the price, or these days maybe half the price, right? So yeah, just think about those options. I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't care if it's the original, meaning original next generation, you don't care if it's a next gen versus the Blob 50. Maybe that's the better route so that you can still train, get all the benefits, but you're not going to spend double the price. If you're looking to collect something, you're into vintage weights, maybe you want the original, you can just expect to pay more. But yeah, I think that's probably going to do it for this. I hope you guys enjoyed kind of getting a look at some of these up close, getting to kind of see them weighed. Hopefully some of these explanations helped, or maybe you picked up a couple details you didn't know before you watched the video. And hopefully some of the feats and some of the lifts I've done with them were fairly entertaining while I was talking about them, and hopefully not boring you guys too much. So yeah, just appreciate you guys tuning in. And I'm going to be doing a lot more videos based on these weights or handles or implements, and just kind of have a lot of different files and different lanes that I'm going to be covering training and lifting in. So if there's anything you've seen on my channel that I'm lifting, it could be a barbell, it could be a pulley connection type handle, it could be a dumbbell, different plates, hub lifts, anything. I mean, whatever you see in the background of a video, if you've seen me, combo something, if you want to see a more in-depth look at anything, just comment below, let me know what you want. Or if it's something that maybe you're not sure I have, or you haven't seen in the video, you want my opinion on it, just comment below, let me know what let me know what that is, or let me know what you'd like to see. And yeah, I'll try to answer it the best I can, or give you guys the best look at some of the stuff I'm doing with the things I got and the way I'm training it. So with that being said, I hope you get into training some wide pinch. Hopefully you can train some blobs, and or if you don't even really care about training it, you just want to find out if you can do it, hopefully you run into somebody that's got one and you can kind of test yourself and get an idea and put it in perspective to what it actually is. Because yeah, it's one of those like feats that's probably the least impressive on camera, but if you're in person, you kind of get it because you can feel it. But so many people, they see 50 pounds, they see this little tiny thing. It's not really tiny, but on camera it looks tiny compared to other weights and deadlifts, right, and all this big stuff. But yeah, definitely a tough 50 pounds to pick up for most people. And yeah, got some history to it and a lot of benefit in your training, whether you do grip sport or not. So yeah, check it out and comment below what you think about different blobs or your training experience with them and what you'd like to see in another video. Thanks.